Hey everyone, welcome back to HD Reddit Reads. Today's topic is drug dealers of Reddit. Have you ever called CPS on a client? If so, what's the story? Let's get into it. So, I'm only posting because I have been clean and sober for 3.5 years now. And anything I say, I have already been convicted for, and I've officially finished all of my legal issues. I have never officially called Child and Family Services, but I had this one mother who used to constantly call me for meth, and I have never been to her house before. I was a bit of a sketch bag and didn't trust anybody, but after a few months, I built a relationship with her where I felt at ease going to her house. When I went to go drop some off, it was child tax day. I never knew she was a mother, normally not an issue for me, I could not care less. I walked into the house and the smell was unbelievable. Cigarettes, sweat, shit and piss. There was broken glass on the floor, 12-inch burn circles on the floor, poop on the floors, the TV was smashed, the bathroom door was literally torn off, and it was in the hallway. I saw a toddler that was walking around with no diaper on, and he had his own poop all over him. He was so malnourished, he was gray. The mother came to give me her money, and I took the bag of meth I had in my pocket, and I told her to buy some diapers for her kid. I told her that she would have to find her dope somewhere else, and walked away. A good friend of mine, who had always tried to help me out, was a social worker, and I told her who she was and where she lived, and gave her some details so she could make a final decision. I'll always remember that kid. The last I heard, he had been taken away, and the mother was in jail. I wish him the best of luck in this cruel world. I used to sell weed, X, and K around 20 years back, and I had a regular that would come to see me like clockwork every weekend. He seemed like an okay guy, excluding the drugs of course, but I can't really criticize here because I was a dealer. And after a while, his pickups turned into 5-minute chats and then up to 30-minute stays. During a convo, he let it slip that he had a son, a toddler, and that he looked after him every weekend, and that when he was at my joint picking up, his kid was in the car and the kid was in the back seat. He had a high-ace minivan, windowless. And not only that, but because he didn't want to share his single bed with his kid and risk it getting urinated in, he made his kid sleep in the van outside. But it's okay, because it was locked and parked in a backyard, so the kid was safe. As soon as he let it slip, he was done as a customer. I told him to get the F out and never come back on a threat of severe beating. He threatened to rat on me to the cops. I told him that my suppliers saw me as a decent source of income and wouldn't take it very well. He left. It rocked me so hard, I felt almost concussed. I honestly couldn't process how sterile and casual he was about it all, and I knew I had to tell CPS. So I called anonymously, and I said I lived in the street and I could hear the kid crying from the van at night every weekend, and that I had seen him incoherent and smelling of weed during the day. I never saw him again, and I don't know what happened to either him or his son, but it has stuck with me all this time, and I feel responsible for his actions in part because he did these things in pursuit of his drugs. I eventually stopped dealing and got my shit together, and the way I felt about this and the realization that my actions affected people far further from me than I thought was a huge part of it. Nothing changes the fact that I contributed to the child's neglect and abuse though. Willingly or not, it makes no difference, and it's only one of the shitty, ugly things I've done that I have to live with. Not sure if this counts, but in the late 1990s, I used to sell reefer part-time while I was in college. One of my regular customers turned his sister onto me. She called for a delivery, no big deal. I went there one time. She had 3 little kids, like a couple of toddlers and an infant. Her house was full of cockroaches. I was disgusted. I called CPS, not because of the drugs and babies, but because of how effing filthy that house was. It caused a lot of problems for her and her boyfriend. They were in the system for a long time. Not sure how it all turned out, but F that woman. I don't know if this counts, but my old neighbor friend that sells weed and pills did on some other neighbors he smoked with because they kept leaving their kids unsupervised or undersupervised. Their youngest would walk over to his house constantly if they couldn't find their parents because they expected them to be toking up there. But much of the time they weren't there either, so he would end up watching the kid for a bit, which became too much because my friendly neighborhood dealer was a senior, besides being a businessman, that just wanted to smoke in peace. So he called, which started a whole new drama because one of the clients told him that he called. Last I heard, the mom moved all of her kids to another state, and the dad of the youngest kid moved to a separate state in the other direction. But that family was full of drama. I felt so sorry for the kids. I also called once on them because I saw the inside of their house and witnessed the lack of adult supervision. Nothing came of either of our calls. I called the dope hook to re-up one night. I wanted to ride along because of the amount, so they said they'd pick me up at the homies. Pulls up with a baby in the middle seat, like a 3 to 5 year old little girl. Car is trashed and the child is covered in dirt. The hook is out there like they've been up way too long, out there acting effing sketchy. So I'm on the mission, just looking at my phone, hitting up my people, and killing time staring at my screen. We pull up at the spot, they run in and leave the baby with me. I look down and notice she's covered in cigarette burns, all down her legs. My heart instantly broke. Hook jumps back in and passes the stash my way. They start jerking the baby by the arm because she was standing up and playing around. The moment they let me out of my spot, I knew what I had to do. Grabbed the license plate number and called the Crime Stoppers number and dropped the abuse tip. Less than a week, they got locked up. I literally walked away from the scene that week. Been away from that noise for over 2 years, clean now, but I'll never forget the baby having burns on her legs. My deceased sister told me a story how she went to her friend's home in a trailer park to sell her some weed. Knew the girl a little from school, said it was a garbage pit inside. There were so many cockroaches they huddled in groups on the walls. It was like a horror movie when you turn on the light. Her friend was embarrassed and started crying. Took her to her kid's room and lifted up the mattress, hundreds of roaches scattered. My sister started crying too and felt so bad for her, but was totally grossed out. So she was like, sorry, but I gotta get out of here. Didn't take her money. Wrestled with it for a while because they were schoolmates, but once she figured out the girl was a prostitute and doing heroin, she called CPS. They gave the kids to the grandparents, and the mama is still being a dope whore 15 years later. We didn't call, we should have. My girlfriend in high school sold weed, not even something hard, but we knew a 10-year-old kid whose mom bought from her regularly. She was using money for her kid's medication and food. But the worst part was that the kid was 10 years old and was on the same drugs as his mom. Weed was not her drug of choice, but something in between. He smoked cigarettes and had asthma. The mom would joke about how, oh, I bet those cigarettes don't help, haha. It's one of those things that you look back on as an adult in hindsight and really wish you can go back in time. As a 16-year-old kid, I knew it was severely effed up, but that was a situation that most kids in my area were in. And with the groups I ran with back then, no one wanted to be known as the snitch. Really wish I could go back and do something. I saw that kid about a year ago at the bus terminals. Only reason why I recognized him immediately is because 10 years later, he hasn't grown at all. He looks 12 and 50 simultaneously. He's still running in the same groups. I imagine it's hard to break out that when your only parent is best friends with every dealer in the neighborhood. As a homeless dealer, I drifted from house to house, just crashing short term to avoid awkward issues with friends and their families. All were accommodating but one. This one in particular bought from me constantly, and every time I'd go over there, the place would look worse than before. I'm talking a scrapped RV and Lincoln in the front yard, car parts and power tools just sitting around the entire house, and cigarette butt piles in the corner. I came to the conclusion that I was being taken advantage of due to what I was selling and the position I was in, so I stopped crashing there, ghosted them for about 2 months, and started to clean up my life. After, my friend reached out to me, and I came over to visit and meet his new girlfriend. I show up to his death trap, and there's 3 kids in the house completely unattended while everyone is in the basement shooting up. My friend proceeds to tell me that her and the kids needed a place to stay, and me being in a way better place with an actual apartment to myself, I said yes. After dropping them off, I had to go back to his place to get my wallet, and I show up to the cops and a couple of women in suits looking for his girlfriend's children, and my friend is frantic trying to tell me not to say anything, which I didn't because that meant the cops would be in my home, where there was definitely a closet full of pipes and bongs. I was questioned by the CPS about the quality of life the kids might have had in the house, gave my very honest statement, and was sent on my way. I returned home and had to very coldly tell the woman that her and her kids couldn't stay there. I cut ties with all of them after that, and heard later down the road that one of the kids cut 2 fingers off with scissors and she had lost custody. I pulled up to this woman's house. I was 19 at the time. She was a regular and often asked if I had any coke. I was strictly a marijuana dealer. When I walked into her house, she had 2 babies, twins, female dealer here. When I asked to use the bathroom, she said she didn't have any running water due to money issues. There was a 5-gallon bucket in the bathroom to pee and poop in. This bucket was extremely full, not to mention the overflowing trash cans and tied off trash bags in the living room. I couldn't believe how gross her house was. I panicked. I called CPS and told them I was a family friend. I drove my car down the road a little and waited for the cops to show up. I watched them pull the woman out of the house in cuffs. She turned out to have heroin in her house. I still wonder about those twins today. Thank you for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing. It'll be greatly appreciated. And if you want to visit the original thread, I'll link it in the description. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one.